At 35, he had everything figured out. No boss, no alarm clock, a number in the bank that felt untouchable. 10 years later, that same man was back in an interview room, hands shaking, applying for a job he was overqualified for at 45, because the money that was supposed to last forever didn't even last a decade. Here's exactly what went wrong and why it wasn't the reason you'd expect. Let's call him Marcus. He did everything the early retirement movement tells you to do. He saved aggressively through his 20s and early 30s, sometimes 50, 60% of his income. He lived in a small apartment while friends upgraded to houses. He drove the same car for 12 years. By most standards, Marcus was disciplined to an almost extreme degree. By 35, he'd hit his number, a little over $1.1 million, calculated using a well-known rule that says you can safely withdraw 4% a year forever without running out. On paper, the math was airtight. $44,000 a year, adjusted for inflation, for the rest of his life. He quit his job on a Friday, told everyone he'd cracked the code. And for the first 2 years, it genuinely felt like he had. Here's what the math didn't account for. The 4% rule was built on historical market averages, decades of data smoothed into one clean number. What it doesn't tell you is that the first few years of retirement matter enormously more than the math suggests. If the market drops hard right after you stop working, you're not just experiencing a bad year, you're selling investments at a loss to fund your living expenses, which permanently shrinks the pot that was supposed to recover later. It's called sequence of returns risk, and almost nobody explains it in the videos that make early retirement look simple. Marcus retired directly into a rough 2-year stretch for the market. His $1.1 million dropped to just under $800,000, not because he did anything wrong, but because of pure timing. And he kept withdrawing his usual $44,000 a year anyway, because that's what the plan said to do. That's mistake number 1. The plan wasn't wrong. The plan without flexibility was wrong. Mistake number 2 took longer to show up, and it's the one almost nobody talks about. Marcus had spent over a decade with a singular identity, the disciplined saver, the guy who was smarter with money than everyone around him. That identity had structure, goals, a finish line. The finish line arrived, and underneath it was nothing. He'd planned meticulously for the money. He'd planned for almost nothing else. No sense of what his days would actually be filled with once the goal was gone. The freedom he'd worked a decade for started to feel disturbingly quickly like directionlessness. He filled the time with small purchases that felt meaningful in the moment, upgraded gear for hobbies he wasn't sure he even enjoyed, trips that were more about proving the retirement was worth it than genuine desire to travel. None of these purchases were reckless individually. Together, over several years, they quietly pushed his spending well past the number the plan was built on. By year 7, Marcus was withdrawing closer to $65,000 a year from a portfolio that had never fully recovered from that early rough stretch. The math that looked airtight at 35 had 2 invisible cracks running through it. No buffer for bad timing, and no buffer for a version of himself who'd change once the goal was actually reached. By year 10, the portfolio had dropped below $300,000. Still money, but nowhere close to safe for the rest of a normal lifespan, especially with a decade of no income and no recent job history to fall back on. At 45, Marcus went back to work, not because he'd failed at discipline. He'd proven for over a decade that he had more of it than almost anyone. He went back because the version of the plan he'd built didn't account for 2 things spreadsheets are genuinely bad at capturing. What happens if the timing is unlucky? And what happens to a person once the goal they organize their entire identity around is achieved? Here's the part worth sitting with. Early retirement isn't the mistake. Rigid, inflexible plans dressed up as certainty are the mistake. A 4% rule calculated once at 35 and never revisited isn't a retirement plan. It's a bet that the next decade looks exactly like the historical average, and that the person cashing the checks doesn't change along the way. Marcus's story isn't a warning against ambition. It's a warning against mistaking a spreadsheet for a guarantee, and against building an entire identity around a number instead of building a life that would have been worth living whether the number worked out or not. If this made you think differently about the number you're chasing, hit like and subscribe. We break down real money stories like this every single day. Comment if you've ever built your whole plan around one number. I want to know what it was. I'll see you in the next one.